Welcome to the #1 show and the source of truth for all things MedTech. Here, we reveal the secrets and stories behind the investments, science, and commercialization of the MedTech industry. Every week, we'll take you on a wild ride with the biggest names in the game, from entrepreneurs and investors who are shaking up the market to healthcare providers who are revolutionizing the way we think and practice medicine. So hold on tight and get ready for a journey like no other. This is the State of MedTech.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. And this episode, our guest is actually somebody I used to report to and used to work with, and that's Jeff Alvarez. Jeff is the Chief Strategy Officer for Moon Surgical, which is a surgical robotics company out of France. And Jeff is somebody who I have just such a profound amount of respect for. Personally, I think he's one of the greatest product minds and product leaders in our space. Just a little bit of background on him. He was actually employee #1 at Alvarez Health, which is the surgical robotics company that Intuitive founder Fred Moll founded and exited to J&J for, I forgot, $4 or $5 billion. I keep forgetting the number. But more importantly, when I was working for Jeff, I was the head of growth marketing at Petro Medical. That was actually the first head of growth position ever in our industry, which was very interesting at the time because a lot of people didn't know what that was. And under Jeff, I really learned how to apply design thinking to product development, to run extremely tight, unbiased surveys to understand what are the key features we have to implement into a product to drive adoption. And I think probably the biggest lesson I learned is the theory of constraints, which we'll get into in this episode. So in this episode, Jeff kind of walks through his philosophy on developing products, the strategies behind it, and also his approach to design thinking. It's a great episode, and if you're not following him already, I highly recommend you follow him on LinkedIn. And before we get in, a couple of giveaways and sponsor shout outs. So first, if you're a company that uses Salesforce, let's face it, Salesforce, nobody buys it and says, wow, it's exactly how we thought it was, right? A lot of times the value of Salesforce CRM comes from the data being put in and your ability to extrapolate from that data insights as to what to do next. And, well, sorry to say, that's not how Salesforce works. That's why I partnered with Clary. Clary is a revenue intelligence platform where they focus on helping companies develop and run revenue through revenue collaboration and governance. It's an investment I feel that not only protects your initial investment to Salesforce, but really pulls the most out of it, from automating data entry from the reps, so the reps love Clary, to every quarter, the leads on the commercial side, both marketing and sales, are able to look at the data and through AI predict revenue and understand how do you drive revenue, how do you increase and accelerate pipeline velocity. So to learn more about Clary, go to clary.com, CLARI.com, or just check the show notes below. And then lastly, if you're either in a startup, right, or even a larger company, you're launching a product, we all know how important it is to find early adopters. Early adopters for your product are the ones who accelerate mass market adoption. They give you the best insights for developing the product and more. The problem is, how do you find them? And how soon do you find them, right? That's where having data really helps. But unfortunately, most databases out there are really clunky, confusing, difficult to use. And, of course, like with your Salesforce, your sales reps are going to be the best people to find those early adopters. A lot of these databases are really complicated to use, not to mention they cost a lot of money. That's why I partnered with Alpha Sophia, who helps medtech companies from startups all the way to large enterprise companies discover early adopters using their database. I've used their database and I love how easy it is to use. I'm able to look up surgeon procedure volume, prescribing behaviors. They've even integrated the social media profiles for physicians. So when you look up a physician, you can see if they have a Twitter profile, an Instagram profile, or a LinkedIn profile, which in my opinion helps amplify and drive product awareness, because if you find that early adopter with a good social media presence, that helps scale that product awareness. So to learn more about Alpha Sophia and more importantly, get 3 free reports from them, go to alphasophia.com/Omar. That's ALPHASOPHIA.com/Omar and get your reports today. Now, let's get to our episode with Jeff Alvarez, Chief Strategy Officer over at Moon Surgical. Enjoy.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. And this is going to be our first episode, kind of focus more on product and product development. And, who better than to have than my good friend, former boss, lifelong friend, Jeffrey Alvarez, who's the Chief Strategy Officer over at Moon Surgical. Jeff, thanks for joining us, man. How are you doing?
Good, Omar. Thank you so much for having me on. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So, Jeff, for those who don't know you, can you maybe give a little bit of an intro? And I'm going to just pepper onto that to start from now because you've always been extremely humble and down to earth. But Jeff was employee, not employee one. I call him employee zero at Oris, where he was sort of hand selected by Fred Mall, and I think originally you were put on. I think you were put on like some of the papers originally because Fred was just like, we'll just put Jeff's name on it. I think is that a true story?
Yeah, certain things like the domain of Oris Robotics was registered to my name for a long time. I think even after J&J bought it. Just random things like that were still connected to me. But yes, it was fantastic. It was the first employee. Day one was April 15th, 2011. It was an office at Moffett Field, which is an old naval base in the San Francisco Bay Area. Fred and I walked into the room, and it was a conference room. There weren't any chairs, and we talked, and he gave me the rundown of what we wanted to build, and then we started going. And we were at Moffett Field for maybe about 6 to 9 months before we moved up to Redwood Shores, where Horace is headquartered.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's a great HQ. So, and for you, you're one of the people who I really look to in terms of how do you develop like a good medical device, especially like a surgical robot. But before we kind of dive into some of those details, like now that I kind of like laid the groundwork, give us a little bit more background on who you are. Like, where'd you grow up? What'd you study in school? And how do you get into the industry? I don't know about you, but most people don't go to college saying, I'm going to go into medical devices. Like some people, I think Henry Peck was maybe the only person, who's like born to go into med tech because his dad is in it. But what's your story?
Yeah, so I grew up in California, born and raised in the Central Valley, actually a town called Tracy, and I just spent a lot of time outside building things. We had a lot of trees in our yard, and so there was always like scrap pieces of wood, and I would just assemble, lots of different uh, uh, toys, right? And things to do with all the scraps around, or friends and I would spend time, running around orchards, playing capture the flag. So it was a fabulous way to grow up. I got obsessed with airplanes. I still am today, and wanted to be an aeronautical engineer. And so I went to school at a great institution called Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. It's up in Troy, New York. It's the oldest technical institute or technical college in the United States, and studied mechanical engineering, and really just kind of fell in love with it because it brought out my creative side, my analytical side, and allowed me to bring those two things together. While I was there, I did an interview with a company that was recruiting um, co-ops, which were like 6-month internships in the San Francisco Bay Area, and this was um, a thoracic surgery company, cardiac surgery company that was doing anastomotic devices for bypass surgery. And so that in bypass surgery, you have to connect a graft from the aorta to a coronary artery. And it takes a lot of delicate suturing. And this company had the idea of let's create these little nitinol frames that will hold on to the graft and allow you to very quickly connect the bypass graft to the coronary artery in seconds. It was a small startup, about 25 people. I got the job. I spent 6 months there. While I was there, I got to rework an instrument, take it through like verification, validation, and then actually see it used in cardiac surgery. So I was completely blown away as a young engineer that this industry existed and I could have this kind of impact. And so ever since then, I was hooked. I've been in medical devices since that time in 2004 with a lot of different startups. I did 2.5 years at a great firm called Heemster Product Development, that specializes in handheld medical instruments and industrial design. And it was a fantastic place to start a career because you get to see dozens of different clinical problems, ways of solving those problems, and lots of different design experience when it comes to injection molded components, nitinol design, catheter design, ergonomics around handheld instruments. So it was an incredible exposure to the industry. And then shortly after that, I got hooked up with Fred Vole at uh, Hansen Medical, which was a company.
It's an old school
Yeah, that
name.
was it had designed a robotic device, these robotic catheters that would go up into the heart for atrial fibrillation for electrophysiology management. And I spent like 4.5 years there and got to see a lot of different ways of bringing innovative technology to create great uh, new devices with incredible capability that just wasn't thought of before, and had the opportunity to lead some of the early development of their Magellan system, which was their vascular system. And we built these incredibly slender and long catheters that can navigate the vasculature of the human body and reach these locations that were just incredibly far away from a that you couldn't reach with traditional catheters. And so it was a great experience, again, getting exposed to fantastic technology. And then after that I got hooked up with Boris at with Fred, and as again employee one, and got to start to build that out.
It's sort of an interesting like factoid about Oris, but can you share the which company did you borrow some robots from to put together like the first prototype? That I always, it's one of my favorite stories, and I think there's like a lot of like really interesting stories like that people don't know about. This is kind of why I have the show.
Yeah, um, the beginning of Oris, we had about $500,000 of investment, and the goal was, hey, assemble a small team and build a demonstrable system for cataract surgery. And that's what we got started on. And there's no way that you can build a robot with $500,000. And so we had to get really clever. And what we did is we bought these two old um, restoration robot systems. These systems that I think they had used for verification validation, and we're just going to dismantle. And then my colleague and I was working with Jin Zhang, who now is the CEO of Nova Medical. Uh, we sat there and figured out how to re-engineer this thing to do cataract surgery. So we disassembled this restoration robot system, and we're able to use a lot of its existing hardware, a lot of its existing controls and software, and then reconfigure it so that it could actually track the eye during surgery, and then can manipulate these little instruments to do cataract surgery. And we did.
I was going to say, for those who are not familiar, so Restoration Robotics has the Artist system, and that's an aesthetic robot used for hair restoration. It's got a really impressive computer vision system. But yes, essentially, you guys took two hair restoration or hair transplant robots and put them together to do cataract surgery.
Yeah, exactly. It was a fantastic adventure because you had to really understand what the goal was, and the goal was to get all that done before you ran out of that $500,000. And you had to be quite effective at figuring out where you were going to spend your time to get to the goal in time. And we did it. We were able to build a robot, and we were able to show a demo where it like could go in and take out these cataracts in models, in pig eyes, and even cadaver eyes. And and then from then we got our seed investment, and it just really took off.
That's amazing, and it's such an interesting story. And I think like one of the reasons why I moved to Silicon Valley earlier in my career was just to like hear stories like that. Um, and no, that's really amazing. Kind of shows that like sometimes you don't have to like build from the ground up. Sometimes you have to just look and get inspiration from different places and bring things together. That's one thing I've noticed about you as a product leader, is that you're really good at looking at other industries, other places, and getting really good ideas and then bringing them in. At least, when I reported to you at Potrero, we did a lot of that. And maybe that's a good place to start. You know, I don't know about you, Jeff, but I feel like there's a lot of, well, for every one great medical device, I see a lot of like knockoffs and things that I don't really see how they're going to provide any value to the patient, let alone like, they just end up, increasing the cost of healthcare. When you think about starting a medical device company, there's so many places to go. Where do you start? Where does the whole journey begin?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So, the philosophy that I have learned over time, and I worked in still in the teams I work with, is a lot of it is about listening to the customer, um, understanding their needs. What is it that they're trying to do, um, and then why they're trying to do it. Like, what is their goal? Because they might be doing something that is completely ridiculous, and if you figure out what their goal is, what they're trying to achieve, you might find a better way to get there. And then to build something that kind of meets that goal, and then test it, right? Challenge the assumptions, challenge your understanding. Don't assume that you solved it. Get out there and test it with lots of different doctors to see, what you got right and what you got wrong, and then start that process over again. But you can't just go out there and have the discussion with a surgeon, right? You need to listen to them. You need to observe them. You need to understand, build, test, and then iterate. Um, and when you go through that process, it'll help you really arrive at a much better solution. Now, the other key thing is what I like to do is what's called the current reality tree. So it's mapping out what the existing situation is, usually by asking why a few times, and you start to build this kind of reverse tree where it's like these roots, and then you end up with the tree trunk, and you'll find key problems that are causing lots of other problems. And then, you can then start to think about, hey, if I solve these three things here, it completely changes the game, for this surgeon or whoever the customer is. And that's a fantastic exercise that can really help you um, develop fantastic products.
Yeah, I want to dig into that a little bit more. You've mentioned the goal multiple times, and one of the things that actually I still have it. You gave me a book that I never heard about called The Goal by a guy named Goldratt, and the whole purpose of the goal was essentially this I think like a 5-step process, which was like you identify a constraint, and constraints are like a really big thing with you. You taught me the sort of the value of it, and then deciding how to like exploit those constraints, then put everything to all your resources around that, and then elevate that constraint, and then finally like just repeat that whole process. Can you talk about the importance, like what's the importance of understanding constraints?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that book. It's one of the few business books I think I've read multiple times, because I feel like I always learn something new every time. But um, you know, it brings up what they coin as the theory of constraints, and what it identifies is the importance in any process, whether it's a product development process or a manufacturing process, or even like a sales process. It's identifying the bottlenecks in that process, because everything you do is governed then by that bottleneck, and then managing that bottleneck to increase throughput in that bottleneck. Now, you can continue to increase it, and at some point that bottleneck will switch to something else. And so that's what you focus on managing. So that's one key area in the book. The other is uh, the theory of constraints, which is really a stack up of activities. So when you have a number of different activities that, there's a lot of different dependencies, you need to understand the critical chain through that stack up, which is, people call it the long pole in the tent, or the critical path. that usually will govern your product development schedule, and that's your bottleneck. That's what you need to focus on. Now, what's different between the critical path and the critical chain is the critical chain employs a resource allocation to it, so that you ensure that your resources are deployed appropriately and focused on moving those things forward in a prompt time frame. Really love the book, and in it's theories that I actually put into practice in nearly all aspects of my life when I think about it.
Oh,
So
really? Like even personal life?
yeah, I mean, it's because everything you do has like a stack of activities. And so one thing I liken it to is thinking about, hey, if I have to go catch an airplane at JFK at 10 a.m. tomorrow. When do I need to pack? When do I need to sleep? Where am I getting toothpaste if I'm out? What time do I need to leave my house? And so all these things kind of stack up because they're all connected to each other. And you can figure out how you get to the airport on time while still accomplishing all that stuff. Like, hey, the toothpaste, I might get it in Paris after I land, right? I could there's things I can take out of um, that chain of activities and push it to other places that shorten the critical path and allow me to still reach the goal without compromising what needs to be achieved.
Yeah, I'm happy you mentioned that because like one of the things that one of the bigger things, I mean, I learned a lot from you during our time. One of the things that I remember was and this is, again, like I was a young guy, there was like, sort of like, I was in Silicon Valley already for like a year or two, but like I think Petro was like the first time where I was at something like when I joined, we were how many people? We were like 15 or 20 people. It was a small company. We're all in one
Yep.
room working. And
Yep.
there's a moment where I was like, oh, like that's how you become like Jeff Alvarez, or you kind of like really become, you like, because I used to think, I was like, what does it take to get like a board member or somebody like a Fred Mall, like to say, hey, like I want you to be like employee one here, right? And one of those things that stood out to me was you organized the whole team around objective key results, and we had like tape on the boards to figure out like how, like what everything was doing. And I kind of realized like one of the skill sets that you need as an entrepreneur is to bring a lot of order when there's chaos and a lot of moving pieces and everything. Can you like talk a little bit about that and how it relates to that? Because I think that part of it, identifying those constraints, is that you have to figure out like what are all the pieces, and where are they all going, right?
Yep. Yeah, exactly. So, I often talk about startups as it's a conflict of prioritization. And that is the biggest thing that you're always trying to juggle is figuring out what do I need to prioritize over the others? Um, and because there's always, work to be done, too much work to be done without enough resources, without enough time, without enough money. And what we did at Potrero is we built out these Kanban boards that forced us to think about, hey, what are the top three priorities that I should only focus on today? That if I achieve any of those, if I complete any of those, it's a win for the day. And then not touching anything else that's in that work stream. And what that does is it forces focus. It forces conversations about, hey, Omar, this is my priority for the day, but I can't get it done because, you have this other ticket that's in your queue and it's not in your priorities yet. So how do we reconcile that? And those are fantastic conversations to have because it shortens the path of communication, especially around blockages or the that are slowing down the flow of work. Um, when other situations that they might rely on email, right, which is a queue of communication that isn't always looked at uh, throughout the day. So it can really delay things when you aren't having those types of forced conversations about prioritization.
Yeah, and I think what's really valuable here, and if funny enough, it's I talk to other entrepreneurs, especially if they're small business owners, because like if you leave corporate America, and you start a company, but you're venture backed, like you still kind of experience this. What's interesting for me is that I run my own business. I'm not venture backed, but then after like a month or so, like a lot of these things that I used to do in these startups, I started doing here because I'm like, oh, there's actually a really good reason why we should do this. Like including now, I actually there's for anybody who's an entrepreneur or a business owner, there's a thing called Commit Action. It's a like psychological productivity coaching company, and every week I meet with this person and they hold me accountable, and I talk about like the 3 things I'm focused on getting done this week, and then we really scrutinize things like, well, how does this the one thing relate to this bigger goal and everything, and you have to
That's right.
make decisions. Like I think like seeing that process at Potrero and how you manage it was kind of it kind of relates to what Elon Musk says, which is like you will get paid in proportion to the complexity of the problem that you're solving. And I think when it comes to running a company and when you're trying to find product market fit and solve for all these things, if you have all these smart people in a room, I think people often are misguided and think like, oh, people will just figure out what to do. But you actually have to set up really robust systems and processes and like OKRs even. Like that's not something that you figure out how to do within a month or two. Like it takes constant iteration, you know?
Yeah.
How do you know when the system
Yeah.
is good?
It's never perfect. And that's one of the things to keep in mind. It should always be evolving and it should always be adapting to the needs of the organization and the people in that organization. So, one um, process that we might develop that, let's say at like a company like Potrero, might not apply to a company like Moon, where I'm at today. And what you learn is the tools and techniques, and then figuring out how to tweak them and adapt them to the needs of that organization. Um, and when it comes to problems that you're solving, it's the same type of thing. You have to focus on certain problems and not try to solve all the problems at once, right? Take like 90% of the problems that you think are out there for something you're trying to deliver, and put that on the shelf and say, hey, these are the 3 things that we need to get a solution for, or a signal on, on, are we solving it in the right way? Because if you try to do everything, you're going to slow the answers to those first 3 key questions down. And what you end up with is, hey, um, you know, 6 months later, when something you could have got an answer, let's say in 2 weeks, if you try to solve everything, and maybe 6 months later, then you come back and test it, and you identify, oh, these first top 3 problems, we got that wrong. You could have had that, a long time before that. So it's essential that you focus on a few key problems and work those to get direction before you move on to kind of the next set of problems.
Interesting. You know, on that same note, I think the other thing that I feel like things that seem simple are actually not easy to do, and one of those things is getting customer feedback and insights. And I think that that's a process that a lot of times that people bias it without even knowing. I
Yeah.
remember when we worked together and getting like feedback from nurses, like there's a very specific process. How do you think about soliciting like customer feedback, observing, so that way you can get to sort of the root of the problem? And you even mentioned this, in the past where when you decide to develop a new medical device, like a lot of times you just go and observe surgeries and, and then ask very specific questions. How do you think about that process?
Yeah. It goes back to that list of things, right? To listen, observe, understand, test, and iterate. And so that's the process to follow is start by having conversations and identifying a potential area, get in and watch surgeries, watch workflow, watch how people interact, watch where there's friction in a process, watch where there's struggle, and in some ways audit what you heard from the surgeon, and or healthcare practitioner. And then kind of once you've done that observation, take the time to understand what you saw, right? Do something like that current reality tree where you're building up different levels and understanding, okay, all these kind of different things we observed, here's kind of the root causes of it, and here's where we should tackle or develop a solution to really kind of change the game. and then you build something that delivers that and test it. And I think that's such a key point, is that you really got to roll up your sleeves and step into the customer's shoes to understand what it is they're trying to do, how the workflow around a device might be convoluted or confusing or cause friction, and where improvements can be made that ultimately delivers a better experience. One of my fondest memories of our time at Paturo was when we had to develop a new Foley catheter kit, right? And we went into the back lab, and I said, okay, Omar, we're gonna, I'm sure you remember this, we're gonna act as the nurses, and we're gonna insert a Foley in this anatomical model. And you're like, really? And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're gonna do. And while we're doing it, we're just gonna see what is all in the kit, what are all the different components, where is it confusing, where is there friction, and we're gonna work on improving it. And it was fantastic because we got so many insights from that hands-on experience. Inserting Foley catheters into an anatomical model, right?
Yeah, it was, I love that process because again, no offense to anybody who's working on that kit, but a Foley catheter is like pretty simple. I mean, it's not like a robot. And so just this very simple thing, I remember becoming a lot more empathetic toward the end user when I'm like, man, like this is one of many things they have to do. And like, we're putting this on an anatomical model. The model's not moving around, right?
Yeah.
And so it was really interesting to understand that. And again, like, um, what I really enjoy is that a lot of these things, if you pay close attention to, you can translate it to a lot of things in your own life or your own business. Like for me, even, I have, my very first product was this medical sales course, and so I developed and launched it, and then, I had to solicit a lot of feedback, but also go through it myself. A few months later, I'm like, oh, you know what, like that. This is actually kind of unnecessary. This is a little bit too much. This is too little. And I don't know. I'm wondering your thoughts because you've been doing this for a long time in terms of what does it take to be a great product leader? There's a lot of young product managers and stuff. They want to get to that role of like being a VP, head of product. What does that look like? If you can describe that person and the things that they're good at and what they do.
Yeah, communication is essential. There's this idea first, about when you're talking to your team, there's clarity over comfort. And so that's the idea that you need to be able to have, direct conversations about things that are getting developed, or a potential solution that might not be going in the right direction. There needs to be the ability to have candid conversations about that, even though they might be uncomfortable, because it provides clarity on what the true value is to the customer, right? What the true goal is. And it's tough because you not only need a product manager that you can do that, you need that mindset in the overall organization. Um, and so I think that's one thing. The second key thing is really that ability to go in and work the problem, through those steps of listen, observe, understand. If you can't get in and do those types of observations and figure out where those root causes are, you'll have too many problems to solve. Um, and then I think the third is actually probably one of the hardest things to do. It's the ability to say no, because there's always lots of things that can be done. There's lots of cool ideas out there. There's lots of things that would create marginal value to the customer, but you they might compromise the timeline. They might draw more resources. They might increase complexity. And you got to be able to say no. That's not, again, not one of those key problems that you're trying to solve.
You
Um,
know, in your past, I mean, base whatever you're comfortable with, but what's an example of a situation you're in where you had to say no, like a tough situation, you know?
I mean, I think it's at Moon Surgical. It's one of our most powerful tools that we wield, and that's because our entire premise is to build a simple, easy to use surgical robot that creates incredible value in laparoscopy. And in order for you to keep it simple and easy to use, there's a lot of times that you have to say, no, this isn't good enough, or this isn't in the right direction, or this increases the learning curve, or this increases complexity. And what's great is our company truly understands what the goal is of the organization and our system, which is to deliver that simple, easy to use experience. And so we know and understand that is the goal that we're working towards. And so we've built the environment where saying no is perfectly okay.
Tell us a little bit more about Moon, and I'm wondering like, um, what made you go there? Because like I'm just gonna say, I like as much as I love robots, um, I feel like there's a lot of robotic companies that are just for the sake of having a robotic company, and it's like we'll make our own like knockoff of XYZ robot. Usually it's like the Da Vinci robot, and we're gonna just like, we're gonna focus on like the crumbs of like this approach or that approach. I think like if I, I'll hit really hard in one area. Look, robotic spine companies. Like I worked at Mazor. So the two big ones are like Mazor and Globus, but there's like, I don't know, 9 or 10 of them, and they all do the same thing to some certain extent, and they make some like small incremental improvement on one part of the procedure. So I when I think of robotics, I really believe in something that's like extremely transformative, that's going to bring a radical change and not just like the incremental thing. What made you go to Moon? Because again, you've been in multiple robotic companies, so you probably have that same filter I have.
Yeah, it's a question that I get a lot, and you know there are a lot of soft tissue robots out there under development, and uh, because of that, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of ideas in development. There's a lot of different capabilities, but nothing that I ever really intrigued me that I saw as the solution to, again, some of those biggest problems. Um, and so thinking through that process and identifying what those biggest problems were, you know, the telerobotic systems today, or the soft tissue systems today, are um, larger systems that perform laparoscopy in a very small portion of it, right? The total robotic assisted surgery versus overall laparoscopy is only about 6%. And so there's 94% of the laparoscopy market has not adopted robotics. And so the question is why? And that's where you start to boil it down. And the reasons are, well, robotics today are expensive. They can cost, about $2 million to get the capital equipment. Ongoing costs are massive. You got to build a new instrument kit. You got to train all your staff. You've got service contracts. You've got depreciation that's hitting your balance sheet, and it's not easy, right? It's costly, especially in today's environments where a lot of hospitals are in the red. The second thing is complexity. They take a lot of training. The learning curve on Da Vinci types of procedures can exceed 60 to 80 cases, and they take dedicated staff as well to support them and set them up. And so, you can't deliver technology that is increasing complexity for surgeons and staff today. We need things that simplify their lives. The other area is about real estate, and this is something that I don't think is easily understood. But out there in hospitals today, real estate is precious. They'll have you know 10 to 20 operating rooms that would be doing laparoscopy, and they're fairly small. They're not something you can put large systems like Da Vinci in. The rooms that they have these Da Vinci systems are quite large, right? And those are their dedicated robot rooms. And so it also portrays just how much laparoscopy is being performed out there in these other operating rooms. And so you need a solution that is designed to be cost effective. You need a solution that is simple and easy to use, and you need a solution that is small and can fit into the places where procedures are being performed. If you don't solve those things, you don't deliver something that can truly transform laparoscopy. So that was our, um, you know, modus operandi at Moon is these three things are things that we have to solve. And I'm really appreciative of the team. We've got extremely talented individuals on it. Dave Noonan is our CTO. He's absolutely brilliant. He's a wonderful human being as well, which is even more fantastic. And we have been able to solve these things in a way that really gets hospital surgeons and administrators excited about the Maestro system.
Well, like every and thanks for sharing that. So like every company, I mean, they're investors, and the idea is you'll create like in so much value that either through an acquisition or IPO or whatever it might be, that they'll be able to get a return. Where do you see Moon having the biggest impact, and like financially as an investment? Is it going after a certain type of market? Is it a type of facility? What does that path, commercialization path, look like?
A lot of surgical volume. Hospitals are pushing a lot of surgical volume to outpatient centers, and these are because they're much more cost efficient. They have much less overhead. Operating room in an inpatient setting costs about $40 a minute to operate. An outpatient setting it's about $20 a minute. So it's significantly less, and the direct labor is significantly less. So it's to solve their issues, their operating income issues. They're pushing this surgical volume to these outpatient centers because they can get 5 to 6 procedures done a day in a much more efficient, lower cost setting, and ultimately that's more operating income. That's more revenue for them. And um, what we've focused on is how to make sure that the Maestro system works for these customers and these environments. And so we went through a fairly extensive process of value assessment process where we said, hey, our surgeon is definitely a customer. Our patient is definitely a customer. Um, the hospital administrator is a customer, and the operating room staff is a customer. So how do we ensure that we're maximizing and creating value for each of these individuals in the configuration of our offering? And in doing that, we figured out how to bring Maestro, develop Maestro into a capability that the hospital administrators are very excited about, the nursing staff is very excited about, and the surgeons very excited about. And in these environments, in these outpatient centers, this is really where I think it will thrive.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting and timely, just because there is this big shift in medicine. I think post COVID, in terms of doing things not only that are more cost efficient, but more importantly, easier on the patient. Even me, I live outside of San Diego, and the idea of like going, as much as I love like scripts and stuff, if I had to go and get an operation done, like the idea of going to one of these massive gargantuan hospitals, just even parking there, it just it makes my skin crawl, you
Yeah,
know.
definitely. That's one of the appealing things for patients is, they can park. It's a small parking lot. 15 minutes later, they're in pre-op, and they can go home the same day with a lot of these procedures. So it's much more pleasant, much more reliable experience than something like the big hospital where much more challenging to get it done. And surgeons like it too. It's easy for them to get in and do these procedures, right? It's the on-time start or on-time start times for procedures is much more reliable in the outpatient setting than the inpatient setting.
Well, I want to be mindful of time. I know that you have a hard stop, and so that means we're going to definitely have you back. But this last segment, I kind of want to do some sort of like fun rapid fire questions. Is that okay with you? I haven't had a
Yeah,
guest say
sure,
no,
go.
it's not okay with me. Eventually, somebody's going to say that.
Yeah,
So okay, so you can take as long as you want on these questions. So first question to you is, I mean, we're out of the pandemic, so it doesn't apply as much. But during the pandemic, I think like one of the things that like kept America going was like Amazon Prime. There's something about, like, I have a theory, Jeff, that post pandemic, because people got so used to ordering stuff on Amazon Prime, that was like the only thing that made you feel good, is like you saw boxes. I think it's continuing, so consumer spend has gone up. But what's a cool gadget or something fun that you purchased from Amazon Prime recently that you're like, oh, this is awesome?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. Cool gadget that I've purchased from Amazon Prime.
Cool gadget, so, maybe something that's just really unique and helpful. I'll buy you some time while you're thinking. So I'll share one. So it's on my desk. Actually, you'll love this. So for me, I'm always trying to optimize my environment as much as possible
Yeah.
for just productivity for myself and everything. I'm really big into health. So there's this company called Air Things. Air Things. Okay, it's this disc. Okay, and just operates on a battery, connects to my iPhone, and essentially it monitors the air around me, but more specifically the carbon dioxide level.
Oh, wow.
And so, like, right now it's yellow, right? And so, like, your productivity, your ability to think goes down a lot when you're in a room that's not full of oxygen. And so when this goes to yellow, right, it immediately indicates to me, I'm like, I should open a window, I should leave the office for a little bit. And so, like, my ability to actually think and get stuff done has gone through the roof, just because in the past, I'd get in my room, in my office, I'd close the door, I wouldn't open the window because I wanted to be quiet. And then I didn't realize how stuffy it would get in there.
Yeah.
And so, like, towards the afternoon, I'm like, man, I'm really feeling like I'm slogging. I thought I was just tired, but no, it was carbon dioxide levels. So that's my thing. I bought you enough time. You got to come up with something.
So, I started reading this book recently called Glucose Revolution, and it's been fascinating because it talks about a lot of things in the food that we eat today. How it impacts our glucose levels, which ultimately impact, our energy regulation. And one of the interesting facts that I had no idea about is it's not just about the food that you eat, but the order that you eat it, right? And so you're supposed to eat high fiber content first, and then protein, and then carbohydrates, and then sweets. And when you do that, glucose spikes are about the third of what they would be if you kind of ate it all. So, like, if you had a hamburger, right? Dissect the hamburger and you eat the lettuce and pickles and tomatoes and stuff first, and then you eat the hamburger, and then you eat the bun, and then maybe have a milkshake. But if you eat it all at once, it's a massive spike, and your body just completely crashes. But if you spread it out like that, if you eat it separately, it's a completely different experience. And so, really fascinating insights into how the human body reacts to the elements and food that we're eating.
That's fascinating. This kind of makes me think, Jeff. Like, I think it's so exciting to be in our industry right now, because there's sort of this convergence happening where consumer health tech and everything is moving into med tech and everything. And so there's all these interesting things, like, in relation to this book, there's a company called Levels, which I'm thinking about getting. And it's essentially a continuous glucose monitor, but it's for consumers.
Yeah.
It's not cheap either. I mean, they got a great business model. It's like $200 a month, but they have an app. And I think it's such a big thing, because I've noticed, like, what I've eaten, how I've eaten has a big impact just on the way I'm thinking in my productivity during the day.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's
fantastic.
It's something that's really interesting. Like, I'm wearing a glucose monitor, right? And I don't have.
Oh, no way. Which one are you using?
It's the Libra, I think, or something like that. And
okay.
It's I don't have diabetes, but it's been fascinating to watch, like, how my body reacts to different things that I'm eating, and how that changes, because it's not always the same. And again, it goes back to the order. It goes back to how modified something might be. Like, the strawberry is, like, massive and filled with sugar versus, like, the more natural strawberry, which is more well balanced. So it's been interesting. Now, the struggle with it is these apps are not developed for these types of insights, right? And because they're medical devices, and so it's hard to extract the information you want to understand how your body is truly reacting to these types of things. And so I'm curious what Levels app experience is like, because I'm sure it's whole completely different, because
it's really impressive.
Yeah.
I'm getting ready to do it. I'll let you know, and maybe you can get it as well. But yeah, that's exactly why. Is like, I started wearing the Whoop, and every time I had a little bit of like alcohol, like a beer on the weekend, it would tank my heart rate variability in my sleep to the point that data has influenced my behavior. And I think I've had like maybe a couple of drinks in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
And I used to be a guy that I love to have a few beers on the weekend, not anymore. Yeah. So I kind of want to get levels literally just to because on the weekends I got a sweet tooth, so I just need to see the data on how bad it is, and that'll just change my behavior. So, all right. So last question. Like, I'm gonna be honest with you, this is not exactly a rapid fire question, but because of the time, it'll force you to just go to the first thing that comes to mind. You've been a mentor to me, a great friend. I always appreciate how you reached out to me and my wife when we first had our son, and you have a beautiful family yourself. So mentorship is important. What's something that a mentor told you that either was like painful, it stung a little bit, but something that they told you that changed you professionally and or personally? Does anything come to mind?
Yeah, it's it was a professor in business school, and he said, "Don't take things too seriously, because time moves on, and there's always more fires to fight or opportunities out there to tackle, and live in today in a way that you can really enjoy it. So." Even though it might be high stress, don't take it too seriously. Don't be too hard on yourself.
It's great advice. Good reminder as well. So, well, Jeff, hey, thanks so much for coming on the show. We're definitely going to have you back. There's been another episode of the State of MedTech. If you haven't already, make sure to stop for 1 second, subscribe to the show, give it 5 stars, and write a review. That's the reason why we're the #1 show in the industry, because I make sure to tell the audience to actually review the show. All right, everybody, take care, and we'll see you all next time.
Thank you for enjoying another epic episode of the State of MedTech. If you're feeling inspired and love this episode, do us a favor, hit that subscribe button and turn notifications on so you never miss an episode. And be sure to give us 5 stars and write a short review, because that helps more people discover this amazing community of ours. If you're a company who has a executive that you'd like to be on the show, or perhaps you want to sponsor one of the episodes, shoot us an email at hello@khateebandco.com. Take care, and we'll see you next time.